Revenge with Karen.
You're going to want to fix this before morning, I said, leaning back in the rolling chair that squeaked like a rat with bronchitis. The database had just eaten itself alive again, and I was already 3 hours into untangling the spaghetti mess their golden boy DevOps intern made by modernizing our backups. He'd renamed the root credential file to YOLO Access Final V2, then disappeared for his 4 p.m. pickleball league. This was my Wednesday, free Wednesday. I'd been at Vistrian longer than anyone in that server room, including the CTO. 6 years, 3 CEOs, 2 ransomware incidents, and 1 very quiet data breach that we never told legal about because, well, legal was at Burning Man. I started as a contractor, back when we worked out of a loft above a vape shop, and half the company ran on borrowed AWS credits and Mountain Dew. Back then, I built the skeleton of what would become the Vistrian infrastructure. The real system. The one they still used, the one nobody documented, the one nobody understood but me. Somewhere around year 3, I stopped raising my hand during town halls, stopped suggesting improvements, stopped logging more than I had to. Nobody listened anyway. They only noticed me when something caught fire, literally once. One of the founders tried to plug a space heater into the UPS. "You always know how to fix it," the new compliance manager said once, standing behind me like I was summoning ghosts from the command line. "No, I just know where the bodies are buried," I replied. She laughed. "I didn't. They never promoted me. I didn't care. Titles don't hold root keys." I did. And back in the early days, I'd built a fallback, a physical hardware token, one of those matte black beauties with an LED light that glows like it knows secrets. It was part of the early schema, baked in before the board brought in real executives to institutionalize the brand. I mentioned the token once at a security meeting. Sierra, the founder's daughter, blinked at me like I'd said I kept passwords in a mason jar. "Wait, is that like analog? Like a literal key?" "Yeah," I said, deadpan. "You turn it and it plays a lullaby." She didn't. I got shoved into her department 6 months later. Security modernization, they called it. She wore Gucci loafers to data center tours and asked me once if the server room was always this chilly. I stayed silent for the most part. Didn't argue, didn't explain. When she asked me to prepare a transition memo outlining all my responsibilities just in case, I smiled and made a spreadsheet of acronyms that looked legit but meant nothing. RAG, fuss, burp, nonsense. It bought me 3 weeks before anyone noticed. The new hires came in fast. Trust fund LinkedIn types with job titles like platform visioneer and culture evangelist. One guy tried to install a blockchain logging system and bricked our billing software for 2 days. Another ran a pen test against the production server on payroll day. But nobody blamed them. They were moving fast. Me, I was asked to clean up after them. Quietly, discreetly, efficiently, and I did. Because I knew something they didn't. Nobody in that building, not Sierra, not legal, not even the CTO, knew how the legacy credential vaults really worked. Especially the fail-safe layer I'd buried beneath the normal root access. The one you couldn't access digitally. The one that required the key. That little black token was still in my bag. Had been for years. Every time I looked at it, I remembered those early mornings, Red Bull and bad takeout, running scripts while the rest of the company slept. I'd built this thing from duct tape and caffeine. And if they ever forgot that, if they ever tried to erase me, well, let's just say there'd be blinking lights and broken contracts. But until then, I kept doing what I'd always done, fixing things in the background, unseen, undervalued, untouchable. Hey, quick thing, before we go any deeper. If you've made it this far and haven't hit that subscribe button, go on and smash it. It's free and it seriously helps the team out more than you know. Same for that little like button, trust me, it fuels the caffeine budget. And let's be real, stories like these, they're brewed with bitterness, black coffee, and the tears of VPs. Anyway, back to it. My name didn't show up in press releases. It didn't need to. It was still buried in the credential schema of every core system they ran. I was the uncredited architect, the backup plan they forgot about, ghost in the code, and I was about to become their worst nightmare. The first time Sierra called me honey, I thought it was a joke. I was knee-deep in a patch deployment for the SSO failover system, one of those delicate procedures that, if interrupted, could lock out half the company for 12 hours. I had one AirPod in, sipping day-old coffee, halfway through a terminal session when her voice popped up behind me like a malfunctioning Alexa. "Hey, honey," she chirped, "can you throw together a slide deck for tomorrow's stakeholder call? Just something cute and digestible about our security posture." I looked up, blinking. I'm not in marketing. No, but you get this stuff. Like deep level, just bullet points. Sparkle it up. I had just resolved a certificate misalignment that would have tanked payroll access for 3 departments. But sure, sparkle it up. That was week 1. See, the company had just landed a massive $500 million federal infrastructure contract. A big boy deal. The kind that came with more compliance clauses than a prenup from hell. The founder, Brad, who once spilled kombucha on a server rack, decided his daughter, Sierra, should own the optics of the project. He framed it as giving her room to lead. What it meant was that she was now in charge of platform security and compliance presentation. I, apparently, was her emotional support sysadmin. Sierra had an MBA from somewhere with stone buildings and legacy admissions. Her experience in cybersecurity consisted of once getting locked out of her Instagram. She thought multi-factor authentication was a vibe killer. And suddenly she had hiring power, a dotted line to legal, and a personal assistant named Bryce, who unironically referred to himself as her digital Sherpa. My new job, running point on her requests, making her look competent in front of auditors, and not correcting her when she called data encryption that locky stuff. She gave me a new title, Legacy Systems Consultant. Consultant, I repeated. It sounds more strategic, she said, while sipping something green and gelatinous from a mason jar. It sounds like you're planning to phase me out. She blinked. No, you're critical. You just need framing. She was right, though. It was absolutely planning to phase me out. By the end of week 2, I wasn't on the invite list for contract calls. When I mentioned that my name was still on several key system compliance documents as primary contact, she waved her phone at me and said, "We'll get that cleaned up. Cleaned up." I started quietly removing myself from things, left the Slack channels, stopped updating internal Confluence pages. They didn't notice. Or if they did, assumed I was being uncooperative. Maybe I was, but I was also being smart. I knew how this story ended. You don't survive in tech this long, especially as a woman, especially in infrastructure, without growing teeth and secrets. I had both. One night, after Sierra asked me to rebrand a penetration test summary into a pastel PowerPoint, I pulled the token out of my backpack, just to look at it. Matte black. Subtle scratches along the edge, tiny glow when activated. Still worked like the day I soldered it. It had been years since I used it, but it remained live. Legacy fallback, unrevoked, buried under layers of patched-on access management nobody at the company fully understood anymore, including the CTO, who now spent most of his time doing LinkedIn podcasts about the cloud journey. I plugged it in for a heartbeat, just to check the logs, still synced, still authorized, still God-tier access. I smiled to myself just a little and whispered, "Still got it." The next day, Sierra handed me a folder labeled Redundancy Scenarios. Inside were instructions for writing a walkaway guide, in case someone like you ever wins the lottery. Right, the lottery. She wanted to know everything I knew, condensed, on paper. That same afternoon, during a call, she said, "Honestly, Jess, we're trying to move away from those old-school tools you love. This whole token thing, it's a little dated. We're going full OAuth." I muted my mic and laughed so hard I nearly knocked over my desk lamp. Dated, that little dated key? It was the only thing keeping her $1 million contract compliant. But hey, let her have her pastel slides and buzzwords. Let her bask in her LinkedIn glow-up while I gracefully transitioned into irrelevance. I wasn't documenting a damn thing anymore, because soon, very soon, she'd find out just how relevant I still was. It started with a calendar invite I never got. Then another. Then a Slack thread titled Fed Contract, Final Compliance Review Prep, that somehow didn't include the only person who actually architected the compliance infrastructure. But it did include Bryce, Sierra's self-titled digital Sherpa, who once asked if encryption still worked on weekends. The official story came the following Monday, wrapped in Sierra's trademark weaponized cheerfulness. She held a little all-hands for our team, well, the people she hadn't quietly ghosted yet. "I just want to take a moment to celebrate where we are," she said, standing in front of a pastel PowerPoint titled Streamlining for Strategic Focus. Her voice was dripping with that brand of MBA veneer optimism that makes you want to eat drywall. "As we align with the expectations of the federal partnership, be making some team adjustments. Nothing scary, just more cohesion, cleaner workflows, leaner security." I wasn't mentioned, not even a glance in my direction. It was like I'd become a ghost, when she was trying to exercise with buzzwords and calendar reshuffles. Later that day, someone from legal pinged me asking for final copies of the vault access tree and credential rotation templates. When I asked why, they said, "Oh, Sierra mentioned you were prepping an offboarding package." Offboarding. No one had told me I was leaving, but apparently I was the last to know. I opened the compliance dashboard. My name was gone from the primary contact list. Then I opened a different tab, one they probably forgot I still had admin access to, and checked the archived paperwork submitted to the Federal Contract Office. And there it was. Jessica M. Hale, listed in all her glory under System Co-Architect and Root Credential Certifier. It wasn't optional. It wasn't decorative. It was required. To comply with the contract's credential standards, one of 2 certified system architects had to perform root rotation and token vault audits. One of those architects left the company 3 years ago and was now selling clay mugs in Montana. The other one, yeah, me, the kicker, couldn't even get on the internal calendar to remind them of that. Sierra had revoked my edit access on Google Workspace. And the CTO, good old Tyler, who once dropped a live schema update during a product demo, had the gall to say in passing, "Don't worry about the token stuff, Jess. We've moved past it anyway. Moved past it." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. I smiled, nodded, didn't say a damn thing. But that night, I sat down with a bottle of wine and backed up everything. I downloaded the original architecture docs, exported the credential chains, archived the rotation logs, even grabbed the hardware token firmware schema, just in case one of these Silicon Valley toddlers got it in their head to clone it. I encrypted it all twice. Stored copies offline, on a zero-trust drive they'd never find, and one more on a backup endpoint routed through a secure personal cloud. Even updated the metadata timestamps to reflect the original build dates. Let him try to claim it was community effort. Let him try to say the system just evolved organically. My name was in that codebase like blood in concrete. The real systems didn't live in Jira tickets or Asana dashboards. They lived in undocumented logic, in buried access layers, in little quirks and fallback routines only I ever fully understood. One time years ago, during a 3 a.m. deployment gone wrong, I patched a bug using a deprecated handshake protocol that technically wasn't even supported anymore. It worked. It stayed in place. Nobody ever noticed. That patch was still sitting there, humming like a hidden landmine. But now they were handing the map to toddlers with crayons, and they'd erased my name. I stared at the 2 emails, one from HR that mentioned strategic redundancy, one from Sierra reminding me to be a team player and not disrupt transition optics. Disrupt optics, I nearly laughed. No, sweetheart, optics were your game. Mine was architecture. And guess what? Real architecture doesn't disappear just because you delete a Slack user. The system remembered. And so did I. It was supposed to be a normal Tuesday, if normal means tiptoeing through an active minefield of incompetence disguised as leadership. I had just finished tracing a permissions issue that was quietly locking out key internal audit tools we were going to need in the next 48 hours when the Fed liaison started poking around, and no one had even noticed the alerts stacking up in the syslog. I sent a summary report to legal. No response. I pinged the CTO directly. Left on read. I was halfway through writing a contingency script when my calendar auto-refreshed and popped up something new. Board review plus Fed compliance liaison final contract sync. I wasn't invited. No time listed. No agenda. Nothing. 5 minutes later, the call started without me. I wasn't surprised. I figured they were doing what they'd been doing for the past 3 weeks, talking around me, pretending they understood the systems I'd built, hoping nobody asked questions too specific. My job, it seemed, was to keep breathing quietly in the corner until Sierra found a less awkward way to push me out entirely. So when the Zoom window suddenly popped up on my screen like a digital jump scare, I knew something was off. No warning, no preamble, just the familiar soft ding of a corporate ambush. I blinked. My camera clicked on. There were a dozen faces in the room. The board chair. The CTO, Rice, of course. The federal liaison, looking about as enthusiastic as a TSA agent on overtime. And Sierra, front and center, in a white blouse so aggressively crisp it looked starched with resentment. She was smiling. That kind of plastic smile you see on beauty pageant contestants seconds before they push each other down a flight of stairs. "Jessica," she purred, "thanks for joining." Sorry for the sudden ping, this won't take long. My stomach didn't drop. My pulse didn't spike. I'd seen this coming 3 months ago. We've been reviewing team structure and compliance alignment, she said, using phrases like shields. And unfortunately, we've concluded that your role is no longer aligned with our strategic direction. Strategic direction. She paused, gave a performative little shrug, and added, sweetly, you're being let go, effective immediately. Then the smile turned venomous. We're recording this call. Oh, honey. I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I didn't blink. Instead, I reached into the drawer next to my keyboard, pulled out the small matte black token, and held it up to the camera. Slowly, deliberately, letting the faint blue glow blink once like a wink from God. There was a beat of silence on the call, then another. Then a sound, off camera, from another Zoom window, crash. The CTO, Tyler, had stood up so fast his chair tipped over. His camera caught the tail end of it hitting the floor. Sierra froze. The federal liaison leaned forward, squinting. That's not the master token, Tyler croaked, right? That can't still be live. His voice cracked halfway through the sentence. I didn't answer. The federal liaison looked puzzled. I thought the system was moved to a cloud-native compliance suite. I smiled. Parts of it were, but not the credential vaults. Those require physical fallback authorization for root token rotation. You know, for security. Bryce made a squeaking noise like a mouse realizing the cheese had teeth. I set the token gently on my desk. The faint light kept blinking. The board chair cleared his throat. Wait, who exactly is the credential officer of record? I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Tyler, now visibly sweating, whispered, she is. It's her. It's always been her. Sierra, red blooming across her collarbones, tried to rally. That's not relevant anymore. She's being terminated, and no. Tyler cut in, voice suddenly hoarse. We never deprecated the legacy access layer. She still has full authority. The federal liaison folded his hands. Then this call needs to end. Now. Sierra reached for something off camera, maybe trying to end the recording, maybe trying to salvage her dignity. But it was too late. I was already gone. I clicked leave meeting before they could say another word. The token stayed on my desk, blinking softly. And across town, boardrooms and group chats and panicked email threads, the unraveling had just begun. The second I left the call, the purge began. First came the Slack deactivation. Classic move. Bryce probably clicked the button himself, grinning like a kid who thinks he's hacked the Pentagon because he changed his mom's Netflix password. Then email. Locked out before I could hit refresh. They even stripped my G Drive access, which would have mattered if I hadn't already synced every vital document, credential chain, and rotation log to an encrypted offline node weeks ago. My corporate calendar disappeared. So did my access to HR's portal, the PTO tracker, the health benefits dashboard, the cafeteria lunch menu, like I was a ghost they'd been waiting to exorcise. But while they were busy slamming digital doors, they forgot about the one entrance that mattered. The one no one in that company, not even the CTO, had ever fully understood. The token, the matte black sliver of control sitting silently on my desk, humming with the authority of 6 years of buried back-end logic. They never deprecated it. Why would they? Nobody knew how. It had been wired into the foundation. Part of the original infrastructure. A fail-safe designed before the cloud migration, before the management reshuffles, before the modernization initiatives turned our systems into Frankenstein monsters stitched together with third-party plugins and duct tape. They didn't just forget about the token. They forgot about me. That night, while the execs were still in damage control mode, restarting coffee machines, spinning statements, trying to manage the optics, the back end started blinking. System logs lit up. Credential pings echoed in the audit trails like sonar. One after another, security nodes ran scheduled checks on the credential rotation chain and came back red. Unauthorized rotation detected. Credential owner not verified. Fallback authority required. J. Hale. The warnings stacked like dominoes. A cascade of blinking red flags. I sat in my apartment with the lights low, sipping ginger tea, and watching the logs trickle in through the secure feed I still had access to. A Rochelle account no one had touched since the company's second funding round. Every few minutes, I heard the faint buzz of my phone vibrating across the table. Tyler, again. First a missed call, then another, then a voicemail. The message preview said, Jess, please, this is not what I delete. Then Slack notifications started rolling in from an alternate account. Emergency access team. Cute. They created a new workspace just to beg me for help. Too late, boys. One message read, Just need you to verify one vault pass so we can re-establish rotation. Another, we can offer a consulting retainer to help transition your knowledge. And my favorite, please, the federal auditor is demanding clarification on your status. I didn't answer a single one. Instead, I watched as the logs kept flagging. Database vaults requiring manual rotation, compliance triggers kicking off automated alerts, a growing web of access dependencies that all pointed back to one thing. One person. Me. Final credential authority, Jessica M. Hale. There it was, in plain ASCII, echoing across systems they'd forgotten even existed. Meanwhile, Sierra was probably pacing barefoot on some call, waving a wine glass and hissing "just fix IT" to an army of clueless tech bros who didn't know a shell script from a shellfish. They thought they could erase me with a Zoom call, and a smug little were recording this. They didn't know that I was the recording, the timestamp, the failsafe. I checked the system clock. Midnight. A perfect time for things to come undone. Quietly, methodically, beautifully. I poured another cup of tea and let the red lights blink. By sunrise, legal was in full throat-clenching mode. Buried inside a 73-page compliance agreement, somewhere between data residency verification and privilege escalation restrictions, was a line that read like it had been penned by a ghost from their worst nightmare. Credential rotation must be certified and executed by named original system architect, S listed in Appendix B, unless superseding authority has been documented, signed, and filed with federal oversight. Appendix B only had one name still employed. Correction, formerly employed. Jessica M. Hale. Me. Legal didn't even find it at first. It was the Fed liaison who flagged it during an early morning sync. Some poor overworked government compliance rep cross-referencing checklist items stumbled across the clause and sent it back with a note that simply read, "Status of this named architect." An hour later, the contract was put on pause. Not canceled yet, but paused, pending re-verification of security protocol and credential continuity. For a federal infrastructure deal worth $500 million, a pause was a public bloodbath. The board was told during a 6:30 a.m. emergency call. Phones buzzed in Aspen, Manhattan, some overpriced resort in Chalum. The founder, Brad, didn't even pretend to hide his irritation. "I thought you said this wasn't an issue," he snapped at Tyler. Tyler, the CTO, had aged 5 years overnight. His voice came in hollow through the speaker. She was the only one who could rotate the root access tokens. "You mean was?" someone else asked. "No," Tyler said after a long silence. "I mean is." And just like that, the full scope began to hit them. Sierra tried to throw IT under the bus in a company-wide Slack message that screamed PR desperation. She accused inherited systems, poor legacy documentation, and misaligned redundancies for the hiccup, never once mentioning that the only reason those systems still worked was because I'd quietly maintained them while she was busy crafting compliance decks with pink fonts and fake charts. She held another team meeting mid-morning, all smiles and stress sweat, talking about realignment and temporary access constraints. The kind of corporate filler that gets blasted across LinkedIn when someone's career is about to spontaneously combust. Speaking of LinkedIn, figured it was time to say hello. I logged in, updated my headline to "Independent Systems Architect Secure by Design." Then I posted a single sentence. No hashtags, no emojis, no links. It's amazing how much people forget about the first 3 years of a system's life. That was it. By noon, it had 1,200 reactions, dozens of DMs, 3 recruiter messages. One from someone whose name I recognized, Department of Energy, Infrastructure Division. Sierra saw it, she must have. I knew because within 10 minutes of the post going live, Bryce tried calling me from a blocked number. No voicemail, no text, they were scrambling now. I could feel it in the logs too. By mid-afternoon, the Vault sync check had failed 4 times. The access verification tool was stuck in loopback. The rotation window had expired, automated alerts kicked in, flagging security as non-compliant pending root authorization. And every trigger pointed back to the same immutable tag, credential owner, J. Hale. I didn't have to lift a finger. They built the whole house with no idea the foundation still whispered my name. And now it was talking. By 1:00 a.m., the office was lit up like a Vegas Buffett sign in a thunderstorm. Every floor had lights on, conference rooms glowing with the pale desperation of people trying to outrun a ghost they didn't believe in, until it showed up wearing their badge numbers. The red flag incident alerts were now triggering across 5 core systems. Vault syncs had expired. Automated compliance integrity checks were failing. One of the secondary monitoring tools, one I personally built to catch expired rotations, is now pinging the Fed's oversight API every 4 minutes with a new status. MCO undefined. Access authority, null. Translation. The system had no idea who was in charge anymore, and the federal government was noticing. Emergency meetings ran back to back. Zoom calls with no agendas. Slack threads spiraling into panic. At some point, someone in IT, or maybe legal, nobody really remembers, tried to brute force clone the master token. Not just reset it, clone it. I don't know who gave the green light for that, but the moment they tried flashing the duplicate, the firmware locked. On purpose. I'd written it that way years ago. Once activated, the token would bind itself to a session signature and burn the firmware after a single root-level access. You could try to clone it, sure, but you just get a blinking brick and a very angry system yelling unauthorized duplication attempt, which is exactly what happened. The clone failed, the backup failed, the vault stayed sealed, and suddenly Tyler, sweaty, exhausted, and probably on his 3rd Adderall, was on a video call with a man from the Federal Liaison Office who looked like he hadn't blinked since 1997. Let me rephrase, the liaison said, voice flat as drywall. Who is your current master credential officer? I need a name. Tyler swallowed, looked at legal. Looked at Sierra. No one spoke. Not right away. Then, from the back of the room, someone whispered the truth like it might summon the devil. She was terminated yesterday. A silence fell like a dropped coffin. The federal liaison nodded slowly, made a note with an actual fountain pen, because of course he did, and said, "Then I need an incident report and a plan for revalidation. Within 12 hours, or we escalate to contract review." That's the bureaucratic version of a guillotine. Back at home, I was curled up on my couch under a knit blanket, sipping red wine and watching the storm unfold via my old monitoring endpoint. I could see the log flags stacking, could feel the heat of their panic through the data flow. Every 5 minutes, a new attempt, a new failure, a new silence. I checked my watch. 1:47 a.m. I yawned, poured a little more wine, set my phone to do not disturb. They were scrambling. I was waiting. And the system was doing exactly what it was designed to do when someone tried to erase its architect. It locked the hell down, and it wouldn't open again without me. Sierra waited until almost dawn to break. Not because she was strong, God no, but because she still believed, somewhere in her well-moisturized little soul, that all of this could be fixed with the right tone, the right PR gloss, the right spin. Like if she just smiled hard enough and used enough passive voice, systems would suddenly stop caring that their skeleton key was gone. The first call came at 5:13 a.m. Blocked number, declined, then again at 5:15. This time, her real number. Her name lit up on my phone like a haunted doll blinking back to life. I let it ring out, then the text. Sierra, hi Jessica. Let's talk about a transition plan. It's important we do this collaboratively. There's a lot at stake for everyone. I stared at it, sipping the last of my wine from a mug that said world's okayest engineer. I tapped out my response. 7 words, me, your recording is admissible. Good luck, send. I imagined her reading it, blinking fast, maybe muttering some MBA-ism like misaligned synergy or unexpected stakeholder gap. I didn't care. Because right then, at that very moment, the systems began to fall. Not like an explosion, not all at once, just one by one. A slow, elegant collapse, like watching a house of cards settle under its own arrogance. At 6:01, the credential rotation queue expired for the primary billing engine. Without reauthentication, it defaulted to safe mode and began locking write access. At 6:07, the internal API gateway flagged an expired root session. Then auto-throttled. Then, based on a rule I wrote in 2018, began a slow rollback of security privileges across all unverified service accounts. 6:15, the identity verification system kicked in a safeguard loop, demanding token validation from the final credential authority, which, you guessed it, no longer existed. The dashboard lit up like a dying Christmas tree. And then at 6:22 a.m., the contract died. Not officially, not with a headline, but with a single email from the Federal Liaison's Office. Subject: Contract Status Update Body. Per Section 14 of the Compliance Agreement, execution of the Credential Authority Clause has failed verification. Contract status: pulled pending investigation into security mishandling and procedural negligence. No drama, no emojis, no threats, just cold, clinical bureaucracy cracking its knuckles. And with it went $500 million. Gone like a mist. A lucrative, security-dependent mist. Sierra didn't message me again. Not right away. Imagine she was too busy explaining to her father how she'd managed to screw up a federally monitored project by firing the one person whose name was literally written into the infrastructure. I refreshed my monitoring logs. Everything was dark now. Quiet, disconnected. My access, still live, showed the last heartbeat pulse from the token echoing through the backup system. A final blink. I closed the terminal window, exhaled. In the distance, sun was rising over the city like a torch behind steel and glass. A company was burning, and I hadn't lifted a single finger. The video hit LinkedIn before breakfast. It was a screen cap from the Zoom call. Someone inside the company, maybe a pissed-off junior in IT, maybe someone in legal with a sense of humor, had leaked it. Raw, uncut, time-stamped. Sierra, in full HD, dismissing me mid-sentence with that plastic Barbie smile, chirping, "You're being let go." Effective immediately. We're recording this call. Then the frame froze, right as I raised the black token to the camera. That soft blue glow like a lighthouse in a fog of idiocy. It went viral in less than 4 hours. Corporate Reddit got it first. Then Twitter. Then tech news blogs. Headlines like, "Founder's daughter fires only credential holder. Loses $500M contract overnight modernization gone wrong. When firing the wrong woman costs you everything that's not the master token, right?" Comment sections turned into digital bonfires. Tech workers everywhere were tagging each other like, "This is why we don't fire the infrastructure person." Inside the building, what was left of it, the boardroom was pure chaos. The founder, Brad, had just returned from a 2-week yachting trip in the Amalfi Coast, walked into the boardroom tan, smug, wearing a linen shirt unbuttoned like he thought he was in an Italian cologne ad. He stopped cold at the giant monitor showing the federal cancellation notice. Cancellation, compliance breach. Contract nullified. Subject to further review. Someone was crying. Someone else was whispering about insurance. Brad's sunglasses slid off his nose. He turned to Tyler, the CTO, who looked like he hadn't slept in 3 days. His voice cracked like a fault line. "You told me she didn't have the master token." Tyler didn't look up, didn't argue. He just stared at the table and said, quiet as death, "She was the token." There it was. Not in code, not in policy. Not in architecture diagrams or compliance decks. But in truth, I was the system. They just didn't notice until I was gone. A week later, I was sitting on a beach in Chelum, hair up, laptop open, watching the waves stretch out like they owed me rent. The sand was warm. The wine was colder than necessary. The token, still blinking faintly, sat next to my laptop like an old friend. Ping, new message from a government email. No subject. Just one line, "We'd like to talk to you about consulting." Name your rate. I smiled, closed the laptop, picked up the token, walked barefoot to the shoreline, and without a word, I tossed it into the ocean. Let it sink, let it vanish. They could build their new systems however they wanted now. This time, they'd remember who wrote the first ones. Big thanks, you legends of the old office days. Subscribe to keep the switch-flicking chaos alive. Your ex-boss is shaking in their loafers.